Hello everyone, and welcome back to Aliens After Dark. Every night on this channel, I share alien and UFO encounter stories, told softly, to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from tonight. Now, get comfortable, let your eyes close if they want to, and let's begin. The second set of clicks came back on a road where no clicks could reach me. That was the moment the night stopped being a shift. My name's Danny Reyes. I'm 26, a specialist in the Army, and for the past 3 years my job has been gates and perimeter roads at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. Most nights, that job is nothing. I want to be clear about that up front. Most nights, it is a truck, a fence, and a sky with more stars in it than a person really needs. The range is bigger than some states. People don't believe that until they see it. You can drive for an hour inside the boundary and never pass a building, never see a light that belongs to a person, never hear anything but your own tires eating gravel. The western fence run was mine that October. 14 marker posts spread along a dirt road that follows the wire more or less faithfully, each post stenciled with its number in white paint. Post 9's stencil was half sanded away by the wind. I knew that post the way you know a neighbor's mailbox. I could have found it blind. The truck was a government pickup with a heater that only worked on high. That detail matters more than it should. On high, the fan was loud enough to bury the little sounds, and little sounds are most of what a perimeter job is. So I drove cold, mostly. Window cracked about an inch, heater off, jacket zipped, listening. Creosote and coal dust came in through the gap. After a while, that smell is the smell of work, and I probably won't ever lose it. I should tell you what kind of person I was about the dark before that night. I grew up in the foothills of the Sacramentos, east of the basin. My uncles hunted, so I hunted. I'd sat out whole nights alone at stock tanks by the time I was 14, waiting on pigs, listening to the desert talk to itself. Nothing out there ever bothered me much. Coyotes sound like a fight in a schoolyard, and elk in the dark sound like burglars, and none of it means anything. I'm telling you this so you understand that I was not a jumpy kid on his first road. The night was the most comfortable room in my house. The western run had one wrinkle, and everybody who worked it knew the wrinkle. About midway, the road drops into a long, shallow trough between two rises, and for roughly 20 minutes of driving, you are in a dead zone between the two radio repeaters that cover that side of the range. Voice traffic turns to soup out there. You can key the handset and talk all you want, and what arrives on the other end is wind and vowels. So there was a standing procedure, old as anybody could remember. In the dead zone, you didn't talk, you clicked. 2 clicks meant everything's fine, moving between posts. The desk answered with 3, received, carry on. You did it at the marker posts, every 30 minutes. So the clicks landed on a schedule and the desk could tell your clicks from static. It sounds like nothing. It was actually the whole safety net, condensed down to a thumb. My first week, my sergeant walked me through it, and then he gave me the only advice anybody ever really gave me about that road. Log what the log needs, he said, keep the rest. I didn't ask him what the rest was. I was new. I figured it meant sensor faults. The sensors deserve a mention, because they are the boring explanation for almost everything strange out there, and I want you to have them the way I had them. The fence line carries motion sensors, and after every windstorm a percentage of them lose their minds. They report crossings that never happened. They report a crossing, then report it again for 6 hours. Maintenance runs behind on them by months because the range is bigger than some states, like I said. So a guard learns a specific skill, which is ignoring alarms politely. You note the box number. You drive the stretch. You see the same nothing you always see. And you write down the nothing, and the night goes on. Oryx get blamed for a lot of it. That's the range joke that never dies. There are African antelope out there, oryx, brought over decades ago, and they wander the flats like furniture that escaped. Anything weird on that range, a guard will say oryx before the weird thing even finishes happening. It was a good joke. It worked for years. That night was moonless. Clear, cold, maybe the last week of October, and dark in the way that makes the Milky Way look like a spill. I cleared the gate at 10, did the eastern stretch first, unremarkable, and dropped into the western run a little after midnight. 2 clicks at post 1. 3 came back. 2 at post 3, where the schedule fell. 3 back. The truck and I went down into the trough, into the soup, and the world got small and close the way it always did in there. I remember I was thinking about nothing. Whether I'd swap my day off, whether the heater smell meant the fan motor was dying. Road thoughts. The tone started under the engine note somewhere before post 6. That's the honest way to say it because I can't tell you exactly when. It was low, steady, and it sat just beneath the sound of the motor, the way a second radio station sits under a weak one at night. My first thought was the truck. My second thought was a sensor horn stuck on, because a few of the fence boxes have a little audible alert, and a stuck one will moan for days until somebody drives out with a fresh battery. At post 6, I stopped and shut the engine off to let the night tell me which it was. The tone stayed. Engine off, keys in my hand, and the sound went on without the truck, faint and even, coming from everywhere the way a smell does. Not loud, I want to be accurate. It was quiet enough that a heater on high would have hidden it completely, and I thought, right then, about all the guards who drive that road warm. I got out and stood by the door a while. The fence wire ticked in the wind. The tone didn't change when I faced different directions. It didn't get louder toward any box. I checked post 6's sensor anyway, and it sat there dark and dumb and innocent. So, stuck horn somewhere down the line, I decided. Battery voltage doing something strange. I logged the box number range I'd check on the return leg, got back in, and rolled on. I clicked twice at the post. 3 clicks came back, right on schedule, and the ordinariness of that was a hand on my shoulder. Received. Carry on. I saw the lights between post 7 and post 8. 2 of them, pale, low over the fence line, maybe a mile ahead. My headlights were off. I ran the road on blackout drive some nights, park lights only, because your eyes are better than the trucks if you let them work, and that far from anything there's nobody to signal. So the flats ahead were charcoal gray, and the 2 lights sat above them like the last 2 windows of a town that wasn't there. My brain did what brains do. Truck headlights, it said, but the spacing was wrong, too wide. Like the truck would have needed to be 3 lanes across, and they weren't on the road. They were past the wire, inside the range, out on the flat where no vehicle had any business or any path. And they were still. Not parked still. Still like a picture of lights, if that makes sense. Nothing breathed in them. I'll tell you what they were like, and this is the best I can do, because the truth is, I never really saw them. There was nothing to see but the light itself. No shape behind it. No body the glow hung off of. No beam underneath reaching the ground. That was the detail my eyes kept snagging on. That the ground under them stayed dark. A light that bright should have pooled on the flat like spilled milk. It didn't touch the dirt at all. They were just 2 pale rounds of nothing in particular. The color of fluorescent tube is the second after you shut it off, hanging where nothing hangs. I sat with my foot on the brake for maybe a minute, and then I did the reasonable thing, which was keep driving my road. A guard's road is his answer to most questions. I rolled forward at a crawl, and the lights moved. They matched me. That's the part I have never found a comfortable way to say. Not toward me, not away. They matched me, pace for pace, sliding along above the flat, parallel to the fence like they were fixed to the end of a long pole welded to my bumper. I stopped. They stopped. I sat still for a slow count of 30, and they sat still with me, and the tone, which I had honestly forgotten, was still going on underneath everything, patient as a pilot light. I rolled again. They rolled. A mile of this, maybe more. My window was cracked, and the only sounds in the world were gravel, wire ticking, and that low even tone that had stopped being a sensor horn in my head without me noticing the change. And no dust. I keep coming back to that when I go over it, because it's such a small thing, and it ruins every good explanation I ever built. Anything that moves over that flat pulls a plume behind it. A pickup drags a mile of it. Even oryx kick up a haze you can catch against the sky. Those lights slid along at my speed, low over the same dirt, and the dark under them stayed cleaned the whole way. Nothing walked. Nothing drove. Nothing disturbed so much as a bush. The flat just let them by. The truck died on the apron at post 9. I had pulled in to do my scheduled clicks, half-sanded stencil in my park lights, and the engine quit the way engines don't. No cough, no stumble. It stopped the way a sentence stops, and the park lights went with it, and the dome light, and the radio's little standby glow. Every filament in that truck went out between one heartbeat and the next, and I was sitting in a dead steel box in the dark with my thumb already on the handset key from habit. The lights were closer. I hadn't seen it happen. That's what I mean about the dark between blinks. You look at a thing, and you look at your dead dashboard for a second, and you look back, and the thing has skipped forward the way a bad film skips, and it's crossed half the distance it had been keeping all night, and it still isn't moving as far as your eyes can swear. They stood off the fence maybe 300 yards now, above the flat, patient, and the tone in the cab was the loudest it had been, which was still not loud. That is the thing I'd want you to take from this if you take anything. It never once got loud, it got near. My thumb did the protocol. I wasn't being brave, I want to be clear. My thumb had done that motion at that post 1,000 times, and it did it again, while the rest of me sat very still. 2 clicks, dead handset, dead radio, dead truck, and I clicked anyway, twice, into nothing. 3 clicks came back. They came out of the handset speaker of a radio that had no power, in the middle of a dead zone that soup ruins even healthy radios, and they were not my desk's clicks. I can't defend that last sentence. Clicks are clicks, but you know the knock of your own house. And those 3 clicks were wrong the way a stranger's knock on your bedroom wall would be wrong. And then, while I sat there not breathing, they came again. 3 more. Deliberate, spaced. Received, they said, in the language of my own protocol. Carry on. I did not carry on. I sat with both hands on the wheel of a dead truck and looked at the lights, and the lights stayed where they were. And here's where I'm supposed to tell you about the fear, and I will, but it wasn't the fear you'd guess. It was the specific fear of being answered. Anybody can be alone in the desert with something unexplained. That's almost fine. It's the desert. But the desert had used my own 2 clicks back at me with 1 added, in my own cadence on my own schedule, and the only word my body had for that was listened. Something was on the net with me. Something had maybe been on the net with me for 3 years of quiet clicks, learning the rhythm of my thumb. Then it ended, the way weather ends. The lights sank. Not up, not out into the distance. Down, gently, behind the low rise between me and them, the way a coal settles into ash, and the flat was just a flat 14 posts of ordinary fence in an ordinary enormous dark. The dome light came on by itself. I'd swear to that part. Half a second before my hand touched the key, the dome light was already burning, like the truck woke up embarrassed. The engine turned over on the first try and idled like nothing had ever been wrong in its whole mechanical life. The heater I turned on high, and I let it roar, and I drove the rest of the western run at a speed I would have written somebody else up for. Post 10 through 14 clicks on schedule. 3 back each time, and each time they were the desk's clicks, and don't ask me how I knew the difference because I can't tell you. I just knew it the way you know your own house again. My watch said one thing when the engine restarted. The dash clock said another. 11 minutes apart, which was strange, because they'd agreed at the start of shift. I remembered deciding on the drive in which one I'd believe. At the gate, the log's time settled it. Both of mine were wrong, in different directions. There was a last thing, and I found it on purpose because I went back in daylight 2 days later on my own time, which tells you something about how well I was sleeping. Post 9 looks like every other post on that road, except the paint. Around the post at about head height, there's a band where the white stencil paint and the green post paint have gone dull. Smooth dull, worn dull. The way a handrail gets in a stairwell people have used for 40 years. A clean band even edges like the post had been held there, often, by something patient, for a very long time. I put my own glove on it one time and took it off and drove home. The gate log is the reason I never told this story to the Army. When I checked out that morning, the log showed my last click check received and answered, on schedule, from the dead zone. The time next to it was a time when I was still driving with a dead radio in a dead truck. Somebody or something clicked my check-in for me, and the desk answered it, and the net was satisfied. There is no box on any form where a sentence like that can live. There's no box for a tone that breathes with you either. So I wrote the nothing the log needed, like I was taught, and I kept the rest. My sergeant's advice. I understand it now. He'd worked the western run for years before me. I still drive that road when the rotation says to. I'm not going to pretend it's easy in the trough, but the job is the job, and mostly the night is still the most comfortable room in my house. Just some habits changed and stayed changed. I log in at the gate early now, every time, so my times are nailed down where the world can see them. And I keep the window cracked no matter what the cold is doing, heater off, all the way through the dead zone. Partly to listen. Mostly because I have learned something about that cab that I'd rather not know, which is that with the window sealed, it's a very small room. And I don't like how it feels to be in a small sealed room out there, holding my breath, waiting to find out if the quiet is empty. Probably it was equipment. Probably half of what I've told you has a maintenance ticket that explains it, filed by somebody smarter than me. That's the story I offer myself on the good nights, and some nights it even holds. But I notice I never say it out loud at the gate shack. None of us who work the western run say much of anything about it, and new guys learn that silence the way I did by watching. Log what the log needs, keep the rest. There's more of the rest out there than anybody's saying. That's all I know. The fullest sky of my career was the emptiest screen I ever sat behind. I've had 10 years to find a better way to say that, and I haven't. My name's Marisol Vega. I'm 34 now. At the time this happened, I was a radar operator with the Air National Guard, on a February rotation at a little operations site out on the basin floor, not far from Holloman. I'm not going to be more specific about the site than that, and honestly the specifics wouldn't help you. It was a trailer. The world is full of them. A squat metal box on blocks with a generator behind it, antennas on a mast, and inside a scope, which was mine, I want to explain what a scope is to the person who runs it, because the whole story lives inside that relationship. 8 years I'd been on radar by then. The screen is a circle of dark glass, and the sweep goes around it like the hand of a clock that never worries. And after your first year, you stop seeing the sweep at all. What you see is the sky. Geese come up as a soft, ragged bloom that shifts shape every pass. A helicopter is a hard little coal that crawls. A thunderstorm builds like bread rising. I could tell you what was in the air over that basin with my eyes closed, just from the rhythm of the returns. People say pilots wear their airplanes. Operators wear the sky. When your screen is clean, the sky is empty. That's not a habit of thought. That's the deal the machine and you have made with each other, and in 8 years, the machine had never once broken it. The trailer that night held 4 of us. Me at the scope. A senior controller 2 consoles down, an older tech sergeant who did crosswords in pen, and had been doing them in pen, the story went, for 20 years. A young airman on the radios, and outside, walking the pad in a parka. Another airman pulling the cold duty we all rotated through. The exercise window had closed at midnight. The last training flights were long home, and the night had gone soft. Burned coffee on the hot plate. Cold electronics. Somebody's orange peel in the trash making the whole trailer smell like Christmas. February on the basin is bitter, and the gypsum flats out the window are pale even at night, so the dark out there is never fully dark. It's gray, like the world seen through smoked glass. There was one piece of procedure that matters here, so let me lay it out the way it was laid out to me. If you ever get an anomalous return, something on the scope that shouldn't be there and won't resolve, there was a documentation drill. A small camera lived in a bracket by the console, and you photographed the screen, logged the sweep number, wrote your initials, and moved on. It was dull, and it was old, and the retiring master sergeant who trained me on that site had a little rhyme for the switch order on the test pattern, which I still run in his voice. The camera drill existed for returns without aircraft. Ghosts on the glass. In 8 years, I had used it maybe 4 times. Always for weather or a software burp. I want you to notice the shape of that procedure. It assumes the machine sees something and the sky holds nothing. Nobody wrote a procedure for the other direction. Nobody thought they'd need one. At about 1 in the morning, the outside airman came up on the local net, and I remember the sound of his voice more than his words. Flat and slow. The voice of a man being careful with himself. He said he had 4 lights southwest, low over the basin. He said they weren't moving. He asked politely if I had anything. I had nothing. A clean screen. I told him so, and I heard him not accept it. He didn't argue. He just keyed up again after a second and said, "Copy, they're still there." The radio airman went out to look. Then the controller sent the young one back in and stepped out himself for a minute, and came back in rubbing his hands, and I watched him decide to say it. 4 lights, he said, shallow arc, low, southwest, absolutely there, and my screen, on that bearing, at every altitude gate I had, held nothing but the soft speckle of an empty winter sky. So I did my job. I ran the set through its checks while they watched. Test pattern, clean. The rhyme in the old man's voice, switch by switch, and every switch did what it should. Calibration, nominal. The transmitter was putting out power. The receiver was hearing the mast. The display was displaying. I painted a commercial flight way out at the edge of coverage, right where the schedule said it should be, tracking sweetly. The machine was healthy. The machine was better than healthy. It was having one of its best nights, and it was telling me, pass after pass, that the southwest sky at low altitude contained nothing at all. I got up and looked out the trailer's little window, which I almost never did, because the window was for weather and the scope was for truth. There were 4 lights over the basin, soft points, white with a faint warmth to them, in a shallow arc, sitting maybe 5 degrees above the ridgeline. Not aircraft lights, no strobe, no red or green, no movement you could name. They didn't flicker like flares and they didn't drift like flares, and a flare doesn't hold formation for the better part of an hour. They just burned there, patient, like a constellation that had come down to be closer to its work. And here is the moment the night turned for me. Personally, I looked at them through the glass, 4 lights any child could count. Then I sat back down and watched my sweep cross their bearing. And as the beam passed through them, they brightened. Not much. I want to be careful, because everything in this story is quiet. It was a small swell, like a breath drawn in. And it happened as the sweep crossed, and then they settled, and the sweep came around again, 6 seconds, and as it crossed their bearing, they swelled again. In time with it. Pass after pass after pass. My screen showed nothing, and the nothing was blinking hello at me through the window, on my own rhythm, brightening exactly when several $1 million of radar looked directly at it and reported an empty sky. I'm a technical person. I have spent my whole adult life inside instruments, and I can tell you every step of the chain between that antenna and my eyes. And standing there that night, I ran the whole chain in my head, looking for the place a lie could live. If the set were deaf on that bearing, the test pattern would have caught it. If something were absorbing the beam, fine, it's absorbing the beam, but then how does it know when the beam arrives, and why does it answer with light? There's no honest place for that to sit. The scope wasn't failing to see them. That's the conclusion I could not get out of the room. They were being seen, 6 seconds at a time, and they were letting us know they could feel it. The controller went back to his console. Not because he was calm. I understood it later, watching myself do the same thing. You go back to your station because the station is the last piece of the world still behaving. The crossword came back out. The young airmen made fresh coffee, and somebody said the thing somebody always says, that Holloman was probably testing something shiny, and everybody agreed too fast, the way you agree with a toast. I did the drill. That's the part I think about most. I took the camera out of its bracket, and I photographed the scope. An empty screen. I logged the sweep number of nothing. I wrote my initials beside nothing, by the book, and in that quiet trailer the camera's shutter sounded like a door slammed in a church. The controller looked over at the noise, at me photographing a blank display, and looked back down, and the kindness of that look away has stayed with me for 10 years. I should say what it looked like outside, because I stepped out once, briefly, in the middle of all this, and the picture has never left me. The 2 spotters stood at the edge of the pad in their parkas, hands in their pockets, stamping their feet against the cold in that slow rhythm people fall into without noticing. The floodlight over the trailer door caught their breath and turned it into little failing clouds. And past them, over the pale gypsum flats, under the black cutout of the ridge, the 4 lights just sat in their arc. Nobody was pointing anymore. That stage had passed. 2 grown men were standing in the cold, watching the sky the way you watch a road your kid is late coming home on, and the basin was so quiet I could hear the mast cables hum behind me. I went back in. My station was inside. The lights faded out over about 20 minutes, the way coals do. No departure. They were less, and then they were suggestion, and then the ridgeline was just a ridgeline. And the outside airman came in, finally, with his face the color the cold makes and something underneath the cold, and drank his coffee without one word. The printer is the detail I saved for last, because it's the one I'd throw out if I were you, and I can't throw it out, because I was there. Earlier in the shift routine, I had queued a couple of sweep images to print for the exercise file. Old thermal printer, slow, always behind. Around 2 in the morning, it woke up on its own schedule and buzzed one image out. I tore it off the roller, and it was a sweep image, ordinary, empty, correct in every way except the timestamp. The stamp read 6 minutes after the moment I was standing there holding it. I looked at the clock on the wall, and the clock on the console, and the stamp 3 times around, and the arithmetic would not change. The paper in my hand was dated 6 minutes into the future, by its own machine, in ink, and I want to tell you, I thought something profound. What I actually did was put it face down on the desk and square its corners, like tidying it would file the problem somewhere. Nothing dramatic happened afterward, which I've learned is its own kind of strange. No debrief. No men in suits, sorry. A maintenance team came through inside the week, found the console camera's clock drifting, their words, and swapped the unit. The old camera left the trailer in a gray padded case, foam-lined, with a checklist taped to the lid, and every box on the checklist already ticked before it went out the door, carried by a man whose name tape I didn't recognize and never saw again. The photo log for that night shows my initials against a sweep number that, according to the maintenance tape, never ran. I've seen the page. My handwriting is very neat. It always is when I'm frightened. Here is where I'm supposed to say I stopped trusting the scope, and the truth is the opposite, and the opposite is worse. I trust it completely. The set was healthy. It has been healthy every night since, and I believe, all the way down, that it told me the truth as far as it was permitted to see, the way you trust a friend who kept a secret under pressure and won't say whose. The sky was empty. The sky was also full. Both of those were true on the same bearing at the same time, and the machine and my eyes have simply never fully reconciled, like 2 witnesses who each swore honestly and can't both be right. I still work scopes when the guard needs me to. I'm good at it. Operators wear the sky, like I said, and mine still fits. But 2 habits came home with me from that trailer, and they never left. I don't photograph empty screens anymore. If it isn't on the glass, there is nothing the file needs from me. And on clear winter nights when the returns are soft and the basin is quiet, I keep the trailer's little curtain drawn on the southwest window. The scope is the deal I made. Whatever waits on the far side of that deal, patient as a held breath, timing itself to my sweep, it can knock on somebody else's glass. Mine stays dark, as far as I'm permitted to see. The building was dead by my own hand, and it was humming. I want that sentence up front because everything else I'm going to tell you is just me failing to get around it. My name's Gary Hutton. I'm 57, a journeyman electrician for 30 of those years, and back in the spring this happened, I was working a maintenance contract out on the military range in southern New Mexico, surveying old buildings for rewire. Civilian contract crew. We fixed lights and pulled wire and minded our own business, and the government paid on time, which is more than I can say for half the general contractors in this state. The building that matters was one of the old ordnance hangars on the north lots. Decommissioned a long time back. Big empty thing, the size of a church for machines, with swallows' nests up in the trusses and oil stains on the slab in the shapes of continents. Light came through nail holes in the skin like little planets. I liked those buildings honestly. An empty hangar in the afternoon is one of the peaceful places of the earth. You hear the metal tick as the sun moves and the swallows argue, and that's the whole conversation. I had my apprentice with me, a kid named Kevin. Good hands, one earbud always in, which I made him pocket inside buildings, not because of the regs, but because your ears are test equipment and I'd tell him so about once a week. The survey that day was supposed to be a day job. Verify the feeders were dead, walk the panels, map what the rewire would need. Paperwork with a flashlight, basically. But surveys grow. The as-builts for a building like that are fiction from 1960-something, and by the time we'd chased what actually went where, the light through the nail holes had gone orange, then gone altogether, and we were finishing under work lights off the generator in the truck. Now, the important part, and I'll be precise because this is my trade, and the whole story stands on it. That building was locked out. Mine is the padlock trade's version of religion. Lockout, tagout. The feeder that fed that hangar was opened, locked, and tagged by me personally, with my own locks which are red and have my name stamped in the brass, and the keys for them live on a ring on my belt and nowhere else on this earth. Power off, verified. And verified isn't a word, it's an act. You put your meter on every lug, phase to phase, and phase to ground, and you watch it say 0. And my meter is a fluke older than Kevin that rides in a duct tape holster and has never lied to me once in 3 decades. That building was electrically dead. Not sleepy, dead. I'd made it that way myself, and I'd stake my license on it. And I did stake my license on it every minute we worked inside. I'll add one piece of background I didn't think about until later. Among the trades that work those contracts, the North Lots had a reputation, but not the kind you could get anybody to say plain. Nobody told ghost stories. It was quieter than that. It lived in scheduling. Certain buildings the older crews just happened to book in the mornings year after year, and if you asked why, you'd get shrugs about the afternoon heat, which is real enough, except the same men would pour slab in July without complaint. The quiet buildings, one old foreman called them once, and then looked like he wished he hadn't, and changed the subject to conduit. I'd taken it for trade superstition, the kind every yard grows. I'm telling you this so you know I walked into that hangar with no story in my head. The story found me anyway, on its own schedule, which I've since noticed is how the North Lots prefer to do things. The hum started around 8, maybe half past. From the far bay, a low, steady 60-cycle hum, and I want you to understand what that specific sound is to an electrician. 60 cycles is the heartbeat of every powered thing in this country. A loaded transformer sings it. A big motor idles at it. 30 years of my life have that note running under them, and my ear knows it the way a rancher knows his own truck coming up the drive. It is the sound of energized equipment. There was no energized equipment. There was no equipment at all. The far bay held a junction box that fed nothing, some dead conduit runs and 40 years of dust. I did what you'd hope I'd do. I got the boring explanations out and worked through them in order, out loud, partly for Kevin and partly for me. A buzzing ballast, except the fixtures were dead and half of them were gone. Induced voltage, which is real. Long parallel runs can pick up a hum off a live neighbor like a guitar string picking up a chord. Except the meter says what induction there is, and the meter said 0, lug after lug, clean as a preacher's collar. Ghost voltage off our own generator, except I killed the generator to test it, stood in the pitch dark of that bay, and the hum went on without us. Patient coming out of the concrete or the air or the bones of the building. Louder near that junction box that served nothing, softer away from it. And my meter on that box with the whole world unplugged read zeros all the way across. Zeros and the hum. Both at once. My whole trade in one hand and my ears in the other, and for the first time in 30 years they would not shake hands. Here's where it gets lonesome. I called Kevin over. He was 20 feet off, coiling cable, and I walked him to that box and said, "Tell me what you hear." And that boy stood there, healthy young ears, half my age, and shrugged and said, "Quiet as church, Gary." Nothing at all. And the hum was filling my back teeth while he said it. We stood at the same box in the same dark, and one of us was in a humming building and one of us wasn't, and I'll tell you plain, Of all the pieces of that night, that one frightened me the most, because a sound in the building is a problem, but a sound in only one man's building is a different kind of problem, and I'd been so sure it was the good kind. I got another few minutes of data for whatever it's worth, and it's worth nothing, and I collected it anyway because collecting is what a man does when he's out of procedures. The hum kept time with me. I don't have a cleaner way to say it. Standing still at that box, I noticed it swelled when I breathed in and settled when I breathed out, and I thought, that's your own blood in your ears, Gary, so I held my breath. It settled and stayed settled. Held it until my chest burned. Quiet. And the moment I let go and drew air, the hum drew with me, right on my rhythm, like it was matching me out of courtesy or curiosity, and I tested it slow, 3 or 4 breaths, the way you test a circuit, because a test was the only dignity I had left. It followed every one. We broke for the truck about then. I told Kevin we'd let the dust settle, which meant nothing, and he took it fine. Tailgate down, thermos between us. The thermos was my wife's, and she's gone now, and there's a dent in it with a story I didn't tell Kevin, and we drank her coffee and looked at ordinary stars. And behind us that hangar sat there being a big, dumb building, the way they do. That's the thing about the old lots at night. Every building out there knows how to look innocent. 10 minutes of coffee, and I'd have talked myself into ballasts again. We went back in to finish the last panel. And at the far end of the bay, the work light was burning. A caged work light, the old kind, hanging off its hook on a column down where we hadn't been in an hour. Yellow, steady light, throwing that cage shadow up the wall, and its cord was coiled on the hook beside it. I walked down there with my heart going like a kid's, and I'll give it to you the way I inventoried it, because inventory was all I could do. 1 lamp, caged, lit. 1 cord, coiled in a neat hank on the hook, 6 wraps. 1 plug, hanging off the end of the coil, brass showing, dust on the prongs. Dust on the prongs. That lamp was lit and its cord went nowhere and had gone nowhere for years, and the light it threw was ordinary lamplight, and inside its glow, faint, patient. The hum, still in time with my breathing. I did not photograph it. Kevin was at the truck and I heard myself decide not to call him, and I've thought about why not. And the honest answer is that either he'd see nothing, and I couldn't afford that, or he'd see it. And he was 20. I stood in that impossible yellow light with my thumb going over the keys on my belt ring, counting them without meaning to. Counted them twice. Every lock accounted for, every key where keys go, the whole religion intact, and the lamp burning anyway, and no procedure anywhere in 30 years for saying goodnight to it. So I did what was left. I tagged the man door with a plain "Do not enter," said we were done for the night, and we were. Morning tells its own version, like mornings do. I came back at 7 with the sun in the building and the swallows going. The lamp was dark and cold, cord still coiled, dust still on the prongs. But I unscrewed the bulb because I had to know one thing, and the glass was clean. New clean. A fresh bulb, no film, no fur, seated in a fixture wearing 10 years of grime like a coat. Somebody could say a bulb like that holds a shine longer in a closed hangar, and I'd nod because I nod at things now, and my lockout tag on the feeder cage, my own tag that I'd hung facing out the way I've hung 10,000 tags. It was turned. Facing the wall, wire untwisted and retwisted neater than I leave it, and I stood there holding that little cardboard tombstone of my certainty, and decided, calm as arithmetic, that the survey report would say the building was sound, and the crew would work it mornings. Which is what happened. We finished the contract. The money was good, and the government paid on time, and Kevin never heard a thing in that building or any other. And he's a journeyman himself now, and better than I was at his age. I never wrote up one word of the rest of it, because there's no line item for it, and because a man my age, this close to a pension, does not put the word humming in a federal report next to the word unexplained. But I'll own the change it made, since we're being honest here in the dark. I schedule the old lots for mornings now. All of them, every crew, and if that costs the job an afternoon, the job can bill me. And I've added one small thing to my lockout ritual that no apprenticeship ever taught. When I open up one of those old dead buildings, before the meter, before anything, I stand in the doorway a second, and I say good morning to it. Quietly, the way you'd knock on a door you're not sure is yours to open. Kevin caught me at it once, and figures it's some old union thing. I let him. It costs nothing to be polite, is what I tell him, and it's true as far as it goes. What I wouldn't tell him is the rest of it. That I heard what that building sounds like when it's awake, and that it breathed along with me, friendly as you please, and that every zero my meter ever shows me now reads a little different than it used to. 0 means no power. I know that. I've just quit believing it means empty. My dog had never once been wrong in 6 years, and he was sitting down in the middle of the patrol road, facing the wrong way. That's the picture I still wake up to sometimes. My name's Renee Calloway. I'm 29, military police, and at the time I was a K-9 handler working night patrols at a munitions storage depot in New Mexico. I'm not going to name it closer than that. If you've seen one storage depot from the road, you've seen mine. Long rows of earth-covered bunkers, grass growing on the berms, floodlights on the wire, and a fence line that goes on so far it stops meaning anything. My partner was a Belgian Malinois named Jax. Explosives detection, 6 years on the job, and I want his record in front of you before anything else, because Jax is the instrument this whole story is measured with. 6 years. 0 false alerts. He'd cleared crowds, semis, warehouses, and thunderstorms without so much as a flick. Dog people will know what I mean when I say he was a clean dog. His alerts were black and white, his off-duty was all the way off, and he had exactly 2 postures for work. I could read him faster than I could read a gauge. Handlers get told not to say this, but the truth is the dog was the better half of the team, and both of us knew it, and it worked fine. August out there is monsoon season. Most nights, the storms stack up on the Sacramentos and bang away at the horizon without ever reaching us. Heat, lightning walking the ridge, thunder arriving late and lazy, and the air on the depot gone thick, with that licked battery taste it gets when the desert wants to rain and can't. The berm grass hisses in the gusts. Moths mob the floodlights in clouds you could shovel. The bunker doors hold their cold iron smell all summer. I liked those nights mostly. The depot at night is a boring place, engineered by serious people to stay boring. And boredom, in my line of work, is what winning feels like. Night staffing was thin, which was normal. Me and Jax on the walking rounds, and a driver named Ruiz at the far gatehouse, a mile and change away, who microwaved fish at midnight with a dedication that kept visitors away better than the wire did. If I called something in from the back rows, the honest response time was 9 minutes. I knew that number exactly, because the log made me know it. The log. My first sergeant used to preach about the log, week 1, sermon voice. The log is your witness, she'd say. Times to the minute, every checkpoint, every round. There are brass keys chained at little boxes along the patrol route, and you turn your key and you write your time, and each box's click is different enough that I could tell you blind which row I was standing in. I wrote clean logs, to the minute, every night her voice in my head. That discipline is about to matter, so hold on to it. I should give you the shape of a normal night so you can see this one against it. We'd clear the front rows first, while the floods were still busy with moths, and Jax would work the bunker aprons in that long, easy quarter with his nose down and his tail making slow arithmetic. At the halfway box, I'd stand him down for water. Ruiz would come up on the radio around midnight asking if I wanted anything from the vending machine, which was his joke, because the machine had been empty since spring, and I'd say, "Surprise me," which was mine. And at end of shift, every shift, Jax did his playbow at the kennel gate. Front legs down, hind end up. One bark he wasn't supposed to give, and that bow was how I knew the depot was truly done with us for the night. 6 years of nights shaped exactly like that. You could have set a watch by any piece of it, and I basically did. The night this happened was a banked storm night. Thunder far off, no rain. We were walking row C, which is the second to last row before the back wire, and Jack stopped. Not an alert. I need you to hear the difference. Alert posture on an explosives dog is unmistakable, and it wasn't that. He stopped soft, ears soft, head tilted, weight settled back. And that's a posture too, but it wasn't a work posture. It was the posture he kept for me, for people he trusted. Aimed at the wire, at nothing, at empty floodlit fence and the dark flat beyond it, and he held it, and something in the back of my neck stood up in a way I want to say I'd trained past and hadn't. I looked where he was looking. Past the wire the floods only carry so far, and then the flat takes over. Monsoon wind moving the grass, moving the moth clouds, moving everything. Except one thing. Out there, past the light, there was a figure. Upright. Man height, or near it, still. And I mean still against a background where the wind owned every blade and bug and shadow, still like the one nail the whole picture hangs from. I couldn't get size or distance to settle, which bothered me at the time and bothers me more now, because judging figures at the wire is a thing I do every night of my working life. I got the binoculars up, and here's your relief, same as it was mine. It resolved into a tripod. A surveyor's tripod with a canvas hood draped over the head. Legs, hood, done. Survey crews do work the depot, and that's the trap of it, they really do. Plotting drainage or wire upgrades always days, but their gear stays out overnight sometimes. Flagged and hooded exactly like that. The relief came down over me like cold water on a hot day. I actually laughed at myself. Quiet. And Jax broke his posture the moment I did, shook out his coat, and went back to work like a professional, embarrassed for both of us. I logged it at the next box because I log things. Object past west wire, row C, surveyor equipment. Time to the minute. My handwriting, my little witness, everything squared away. We finished the row, worked the back wire, came up the far side. 40 minutes, give or take, and the route brought us back along row C the other direction, and I looked for the tripod the way you look for a landmark you've already filed. It wasn't there. Nothing was there. Flat, grass, wind, a mile of nothing in the flood's spill and the dark behind it. No crew lights, no truck, no anything. And nobody drives onto that flat at night without me seeing headlights from 3 rows away. I stood at the wire a long minute, working the binoculars over every foot of it. And then I did something that isn't in any procedure. I bent down and looked at the ground on our side, where the dust drifts fine as flour against the fence apron. Dust that holds a record of everything. I've seen jackrabbit prints in that dust. Beetle tracks. That evening's wind ripples, printed neat as corduroy. I marked where the tripod had stood off my log entry's bearing, climbed the maintenance stile, and walked the 20 yards with my light. There were no marks at all, not 3 tripod feet. Not a scuff where somebody set it or struck it. Not a boot print, coming or going. Anywhere in a circle I walked twice. The dust lay perfect, printed with wind and nothing else, in the one place where something had verifiably stood 40 minutes before, because I'd glassed it and logged it to the minute. I stood out there on the wrong side of my own wire and ran the call in my head, because making the call is the job, and I want you to hear the math I did, since it's the same math every night worker in this story of mine has probably done. 9 minutes for Ruiz to reach me. Then Ruiz, a good man with fish on his breath, standing where I stood, looking at clean dust. Then the desk asking what exactly I was reporting. A tripod I had logged, which was gone, which crews collect except no truck had come. A feeling. My dog sat funny. I could hear every word of it in the day shift voices that would read it. And against all that I put the one hard thing I had, which was dust with nothing in it, and dust with nothing in it is, on paper, exactly what a depot is supposed to have. There was no call in any of it. There was just me, a flashlight, and a piece of ground being more empty than it had a right to be. I climbed back over the stile. Jax was still on the depot side of the wire, and when I came back over the stile he was sitting, in the middle of the patrol road, facing the opposite direction, away from the flat, away from the wire, away from the spot I'd just walked, and I want to put his stillness next to that tripod stillness so you feel the difference, because his was worse. He wasn't frozen. Nothing about him was afraid. He sat the way he sat when a thing was decided, calm as Sunday, ears easy, watching the empty row ahead of us, and would not look at the flat. My whole body was doing the needle under the skin thing, every hair up, and my partner, my clean dog, my instrument, sat there radiating a calm I could not find one reason for, with his back to it. I whispered him in, Jax, with me. And there was a beat, I swear it on my log, one full beat where that dog stayed put, looking down the row, before he rose and came to heel. 6 years. He'd never given me a beat in 6 years. We finished the round. That's the job. I'd like to tell you I did it well. What I did was do it, box to box, click to click, and at each box I wrote my time and moved, and the thunder stayed banked on the mountains, and nothing else looked at us all night, though I have never in my life been so aware of how much dark a depot holds between its lights. Turnover came at 6, and the log, my little witness, is where this stops being a story about a tripod. Reviewing my entries against the desk copy the way I did every morning, I found my row C times wrong. 2 checkpoint entries, 4 minutes apart, in my handwriting, ink unsmudged, at boxes that are a 15-minute walk from each other, and I do not walk fast rows on a weird night. I walk careful ones. There is no version of my legs that makes those times true. Under them, my own note. Thunder over depot, logged at an hour when the storm never came off the mountains. I've kept a copy. I look at it. Sometimes the way you'd look at a photograph of yourself somewhere you've never been. It's my writing. To the minute. My first sergeant's sermon turned around and used on me. The desk had one more item for me. The perimeter camera that covers row C had gone to weather static for a window that night. Just static, snow on the feed. The tape before that window is glass clear. The tape after is glass clear. The window it lost sits over the exact stretch of my 2 wrong minutes. And the maintenance write-up said moisture. Probable, monsoon season. And the write-up isn't wrong to say so. It's monsoon season every August. The camera has never done it since. I rotate out in the spring, and I'll go without fuss. I still write my times to the minute. That discipline held even after I learned what it's worth, which is one kind of true and not the whole of it. But the real change is quieter, and I'd only say it to another handler. I read my partner over my paperwork now. The log is a witness, but Jax was never once wrong. And Jax, that night, looked at whatever stands out past the floods pretending to be tripods and made a professional assessment and turned his back on it. Polite. The way he'd end an argument, that was over. So on the nights he goes soft-eared at the wire now, I don't glass the flat anymore. I finish the row with my eyes on my own lights, and I write no activity, and I leave a biscuit on the ledge of row C's box every night, which is not in any procedure either. I've never once seen what takes it. I've never once found it in the morning. 41 head of cattle were standing in the dark when I came over the rise, every one of them up, and every muzzle aimed at the same empty piece of sky. I've been around cattle my whole life, and I'd never seen that, and I hope I don't see it again. My name's Lloyd Baca. I'm 63. My family has run cattle on a grazing lease along the eastern boundary of the missile range for 3 generations. My grandfather, my father, and me on the same allotment, off the same washboard road, through the same 3 cattle guards. When a piece of country has held your name that long, you get to thinking you know it. The country lets you think that. It's patient. The lease sits right up against the range fence. West of our wire, it's government, all of it, clear to the mountains, and nobody goes there, by law and by design, which suits the cattle and suits me. My nearest neighbor is 11 miles. The improvements amount to a windmill, a steel tank, some corrals my father built, and the road. That's the whole kingdom. The windmill has a rust bloom at the water line that comes back every year no matter what I do, and on summer nights the tank draws moths in a paddle-soft cloud, and the overflow keeps a little green marsh alive about the size of a kitchen. I can stand at that tank in the dark and tell you by sound alone what the night is doing. That matters for this story. Sound is half of what happened by being gone. Now, about lights in the sky. A man who ranches against a missile range spends his life watching the government's fireworks, and I want that said early, because I'm not somebody who runs to town over a light. I've seen flares hang and drip. I've watched booster burns go up like slow lightning and drones come over in their little strings. My father used to tell about the green fireballs, back in the late 40s, whole years when green fire crossed the sky regular as mail, and he told it the way you'd tell about a wet spring. Weather, all of it. The range makes weather of its own kind, and we ranch under it, and I can name every variety it's ever shown me. What I saw in June wasn't any of them, and mostly what I saw was my own cattle seeing it first. There's an etiquette to ranching against the range, too, and my father taught it to me the same year he taught me to weld. You call the range office about broken wire, about a gate left open, about anything with paperwork attached. You do not call them about lights, not because they're unkind. The men I've dealt with over the years have been decent to us, but a light report goes into a different drawer, and the man who files it gets remembered as the man who files those. And on a lease that comes up for renewal every so often, a family learns what's worth being remembered for. 3 generations of us have watched that western sky do what it does and kept our observations at the kitchen table. I'm only breaking the etiquette now because I'm old, and because whatever this was, it wasn't the government's weather. The government's weather makes noise. There's a ritual I have to explain, or the rest won't weigh right. The count. You count your cattle at evening, and you count them at morning. Every day, twice, and you count them again if you're not sure, because a count is a promise. That's my grandfather's sentence come down through my father with the lease itself. A count is a promise. 41 head that June, which is an aggravating number to count because of a set of twins that would not stay with their mother, and I'd counted them at the tank that evening same as every evening of my life, and got my 41 and gone into supper. Elena had the porch light on by the time I finished. Kitchen clock said 9:40. That clock was a wedding gift, and it has run 5 minutes proud for 40 years, and I correct it in my head without knowing I'm doing it, the way you step over a familiar route. What took me back out that night was a heifer. First calf heifer, close to her time, and I didn't like how she'd been standing that evening. So around 1 a.m, I gave up pretending to sleep, took the truck, and went to check her. Calving, Kit in the bed, chains and iodine and a towel gone stiff as jerky. Chapo stayed on the porch. He's my dog, or was my working dog once, deaf as a post now, and the happier for it, I've come to think. The road out is 15 minutes of washboard and 3 cattle guards, and each guard rattles its own way under the tires. First one loose and jangly, second one tight, third one with a dead bar that thumps. A man who's crossed them 10,000 times hears them the way he hears his own name. I came over the rise by the tank, and the headlights swept the flat. And there stood the herd. All of it. Up out of their bedding ground, which was still warm. I felt it later with my hand. Cattle stand up at night for weather, for coyotes, for a truck they know means feed, they don't stand still. A stood-up herd mill's calves ball, somebody's always working a complaint. These stood like fence posts. 41 animals silent, spread out from the tank in the scrub, and every head was high and every muzzle was pointed west and up, at one particular piece of sky over the range, and I got out of the truck and stood among my own cattle, and not one of them knew I was alive. I looked where they looked. I'd like to tell you there was something to see. What there was a softness. West and up, over the government flats, the sky had a place in it that wasn't a light and wasn't the memory of one, but something in between, the way a lamp leaves a warmth on the wall a second after you switch it off. No shape, no edge to it. The stars around it sat normal, and that one patch of dark had a held breath quality I don't have better words for, 63 years of nights notwithstanding. It was the kind of thing you could stare at and talk yourself out of, and I began to, standing there. And then I noticed the quiet, and the quiet is what I cannot talk myself out of to this day. June nights on that lease are loud if you know how to hear them. Crickets in the overflow marsh, nighthawks booming, the windmill clanking along in any breath of air, and the tank always ticking and slopping a little. All of it was gone, not hushed, gone, every voice at once, and the breeze still moving. I could feel it on my neck, and the windmill stood dead still in it. A moving breeze and a stopped mill. The tank top like poured glass, and 41 cattle and one old man standing in all that silence together watching a patch of nothing. Like the whole flat was a church and something had just walked in the back. I don't know how long. That's not a manner of speaking, as you'll see. My hat was in my hand. I noticed that at some point my hat in my hand, standing bareheaded in my own headlights like a man at a graveside, and no memory of taking it off. There wasn't fear in it, or not the kind that runs. It felt finished, is the only way I can put it. Complete. Like being looked at by something that had finished looking a long time ago and was just letting the looking arrive, the way starlight is old news. And then it was over. No event to it. The crickets came back in one breath. The windmill clanked and turned. The herd broke and milled, and one of the twins bawled. And the night was so normal so fast that I put my hat on and felt foolish. The heifer, you'll want to know, was fine. Off by the corrals, bagged up and licking a brand new calf in my headlights, both doing better than their owner. That's ranching for you. The night hands you a mystery and a calf inside the same hour and expects you home by breakfast either way. I sat on the tailgate and watched that calf find its legs, 10 minutes of the best kind of ordinary, and then I drove home. Here's where it stops being a story I'd tell at the feed store. The drive home is 15 minutes and 3 cattle guards, and I remember leaving the corrals, and I remember Elena's porch light coming up over the last rise. I do not remember the guards, not one of the 3, A man doesn't remember every crossing of his life, sure, but this isn't that. This is a hole. Their sounds aren't in my memory of that drive. The loose one, the tight one, the dead thump. 3 noises I've heard 10,000 nights, gone like the crickets were gone, and when I came in the kitchen, the clock said 3:10. I stood looking at it, correcting the 5 minutes in my head out of habit, and it didn't help. By any honest arithmetic of that night, I was long, somewhere between the corrals and the porch, by better than 40 minutes. Elena had woke when the porch light swept the bedroom window. She keeps witness of such things without meaning to, and her account and my watch and that proud running clock all agreed with each other and against me. 40 minutes, thereabouts, on a road I could drive asleep. Maybe I did. That's what I'd offer you if you offered it to me first, and neither of us would believe it. One more thing, and then the finish. 2 mornings later, walking the flat off the lease road looking for the twins, I came on a ring in the scrub, 60 feet across, or near it. Not burned, not pressed down. Nothing broken or bent, no track in or out, and I looked, the way Renee looked at her dust, though I didn't know her story then, and she didn't know mine. What the ring was dry. Everything inside it bone dry, in a morning where the dew had soaked my boots to the ankle every step of the walkout. And the edge of that dryness was sharp as the rim of a plate. Wet desert, dry circle, a line you could straddle, 1 boot dark and 1 boot pale. I stood over it a while. Then I went and found the twins, because the twins were mine to find, and the ring wasn't. The wind took it inside 3 days, like everything out there. I told Elena. All of it, the once, at the kitchen table with the proud clock going. She listened the way she's listened to me for 40 years, and she took my hand, and she said, "The desert was here first, Lloyd." And I have turned that over more nights than I'll admit, because I think it's the whole of what I know, said shorter than I could say it. The desert was here first. Whatever walks its far side of my wire was here before the wire, and before the range, and before my grandfather's first count, and it doesn't owe the Baca family an accounting. So I still count evening and morning. A count is a promise. But I'll tell you what changed since you've listened this long. It's the morning count I trust now, and on the nights they come maybe twice a year, when I look out and see the herd standing up in the dark, all facing one way, all silent. I don't take the truck out anymore. I put my hat back on the peg, and I go to bed beside Elena, and I let the range keep its own books. They've always balanced by morning. Every head, all 41. I'd just as soon not know how. 200 people were asleep all around me, and every single one of them had turned in their sleep to face the ridge. I was the only person standing up in a camp full of compass needles, and I have never in my life felt so far from other human beings while being 20 feet from hundreds of them. My name's Tanya Brooks. I'm 31, a supply sergeant, and this happened in September on a 2-week field exercise on a basin flat in southern New Mexico, in sight of a low ridge that I still see with my eyes closed some nights. Let me build you the camp, because the camp is the instrument this story plays on. Tent rows on gypsum. If you've never walked gypsum flats at night, they're pale enough to make their own half-light. So, even under light discipline, the ground glows faintly, like snow that forgot to be cold, and boot prints go down into it like bruises. Light discipline means red lenses, no white light, and the camp at night from 30 feet away is just shapes and rows. The one exception was the medical tent, which kept real light inside its blackout flaps, and one seam of it always leaked, a thin white line standing in the dark like a crack in a door to somewhere lit. My job on an exercise is arithmetic. Beans, bullets, fuel, water, mostly fuel. The camp ran on a generator set behind the supply tent, and the generator ran on my clipboard. Fuel log to the 10th of an hour, dip the tank, note the rate, set the watch alarm, refuel on schedule. My watch alarm was a little cricket chirp I'd picked exactly because it would wake me and nobody else. 4th rotation on that range, and I want that on the record for the usual reason. I knew the basin's nights the way you know a roommate. I knew the generator's harmonics so well I could tell fuel state by ear from my cot, a note that goes thin as the tank goes down. I knew the oryx that cross the flat at a distance, weird, tall shapes you learn not to draw down on, and I knew the wind. The O230 wind is a real thing out there. The ridge exhales downhill at about 2:30 every clear night, regular enough that the old hands time their smoke breaks to it. You feel it come through camp like a long, slow breath. That wind matters. Hold on to it. The night this happened was the 9th or 10th of the exercise, deep enough in that everything had a groove. My cricket chirped it too. I dipped the tank, logged it, topped the generator from the cans, logged that, and stood there a minute in the red lens dark doing the pleasant math of a night that's behaving. Then I did my usual slow loop, because a supply sergeant who walks the camp at night finds problems while they're still small. Tent rows quiet, snoring in the usual keys. The med tent's white seam burning steady. Somewhere out on the perimeter a fire guard was supposed to be walking his hour, and the camp held that low hum of many people breathing that you stop hearing until, one night, you hear it. The Odo 230 wind came on schedule. I felt it arrive on my face, that long downhill exhale, gypsum dust lifting a little around my boots, and the sound of it never came. That's the first thing. Wind makes camp noise, always. It luffs tent fabric, it hums in guy lines. It rolls a dropped canteen cup somewhere every single night. I stood in a wind I could feel, watching tent fabric move at the edge of my red light, and the night had gone absolutely silent around it. My own boots on the gypsum had gone soft, like the ground had put on carpet. The many people breathing hum was still there, but nothing else was. And then came the pressure. Ears first, that thick descending a grade feeling, swallow and it doesn't clear. And under the pressure the generator, my generator, whose voice I knew to the 10th of an hour, began to bend. The note slid, slow and wrong, like a record with a thumb dragging on it, down and down, without ever quite stopping. I looked at the ridge because there was nowhere else the night was pointing. Over it, low, sat 3 soft lights in a shallow triangle. I'd tell you they were hovering, but that's not the word. Hovering is an activity. These weren't doing anything at all. They were present, the way the moon is present, as if they had always been part of that ridgeline, and I was only now being permitted to notice, and their light was the kind that doesn't travel. It sat on them and went nowhere. 3 pale points that lit not one grain of gypsum, not one thread of a tent, nothing but themselves. I want to be honest about my first professional thought, which was aircraft, exercise assets, some range thing I hadn't been briefed on, and how fast that thought starved to death. Aircraft move, and these did not. Flares fall, and these did not. And no exercise asset I ever heard of turns off the sound of wind. I went to the med tent, I'm not ashamed of that. It was the one human-lit place in my world, and the walk took me down the company street between the rows. And that walk was when the night showed me its real card. The camp was still asleep. All of it. Whatever had the wind by the throat had not woken one soldier, and when I looked into the first open-flapped tent in my red light, meaning only to check on the snoring, I saw both sleepers had turned in their bags, facing west, toward the ridge, and the next tent the same, and the next. Some on backs with faces tipped left, some curled, all arranged, every sleeping body down both rows angled to the same bearing like iron filings under a sheet of paper when the magnet slides beneath. 200 people, give or take, and I will swear this part with my hand on anything you bring me. Their breathing had fallen in together. Not perfectly, close. A camp-wide tide of it, in and out, slow. In time with nothing I could hear, and me standing in the middle of that street with a clipboard, the only creature in the herd left standing, thinking absurdly of cattle, of a thing I'd seen once as a kid from a highway. A whole feedlot standing motionless in the rain, all facing the same fence, and how I'd asked my mother what they were looking at, and she'd said, "Nothing, honey. Cows just do that." Standing in that street, I understood that I had never once believed her. The medic was awake, specialist, headphones with one ear out, charting by real light, and the ordinary humanity of that tent was like stepping into shallow water after deep. He looked up, normal as Tuesday. I asked if he'd heard anything strange, and he said, "Like what?" And the honest answer was nothing. You can't hear the strange thing is the missing sounds, so I said wind. He said he had music going. He offered me peanut butter crackers, which on an exercise are currency, and I took them and made myself eat one. And I noticed his cot, his chair, his whole small lit world faced east, away from it. I have wondered since whether that was the headphones or the light, or whether awake was all it took, and I don't get to know. I told him to stay put, which he found funny, since he was on shift with charts to do, and I went back out. 2 things left, and I'll keep them in order. The fire guard first. I walked his loop to find him because his hour was mine to check, and his post was empty. Rifle grounded properly against the post stand the way you were taught. Canteen sitting there, and when I picked it up it was warm, warmer than a September night leaves things. No guard. I found him in his own tent, asleep in his bag, boots still on, facing west with all the others, and no shaking of mine got more out of him than a sleeper's mumble, and I checked his breathing and his pulse like the medic taught us, and they were strong and slow, and I let him lie. PFC Hoyt, 19 years old, from Ohio. Remember his name for the end of this. Then the street again, alone, because my tank and my rose and my arithmetic were all I had left of the night that was supposed to be mine. The triangle sat over the ridge. The camp breathed its tide. And this is the part I only say quietly. Standing there, it started feeling reasonable to lie down. Not sleepy, reasonable. The way a thing you've resisted starts to sound sensible when everyone else has already agreed. 200 of my people were resting, facing what there was to face, and the standing woman with the clipboard was the one making a scene, and the desire came up through me, patient and kind as a nurse, and what I did about it was hold my clipboard against my chest with both arms, like a plate of armor over exactly nothing, and stand there and keep standing until the lights were not there anymore. I don't say they left, there was no leaving, they were, and then they were not, the way a thought ends, and the wind sound arrived mid-gust like the world remembering its lines, tent fabric luffing, a canteen cup rolling somewhere, the generator's note swimming back up to its true pitch, and I stood in the middle of all that ordinary racket and shook like it was January. Morning made its usual arguments. 200 soldiers woke up unbothered, on their various sides and backs, complaining about the chow, remembering nothing, and if any of them turned west in the night kept it between them. But mornings can't argue with a fuel log. Mine showed the generator topped at 2, my hand, my initials, my dip reading. The tank, dipped again at first light, dry. That generator had run 4 hours and 10 minutes on 40 minutes of fuel, or it had run on something else, or time out there had gone as soft as the sound had, and supply closed it out as field conditions. Spillage probable, because there is a box for spillage and there is no box for the other thing, and Hoyt. Hoyt got a counseling statement for abandoning his fireguard post, An hour he could not account for and did not contest, because what was the boy going to say? He signed it, looking like a kid who'd lost something he couldn't name. I signed as a witness. I have signed a lot of things in the Army. That one is the only one that still comes to see me at night, because I stood in that street and I knew, better than anyone alive, that wherever Hoyt had been for his missing hour, walking his post was not among the choices the night had offered him. I did not report the rest. There it is. The sergeant with the clipboard, the arithmetic woman, wrote spillage probable and said nothing, and I would do it again tomorrow. And if anyone ever wonders why soldiers don't talk about the desert at night, that morning is the whole answer. Because the desert doesn't leave you evidence, it leaves you arithmetic that doesn't balance and a 19-year-old's signature on the wrong line, and if you talk, the arithmetic lands on you. I'm out of the field rotation now. Home station, husband. A house with a generator I refuse to own, which he thinks is a quirk. Some nights I wake at 3:40 exactly, no cricket, no reason, listening for a wind I can feel and can't hear. And it's never there, it's just the house. And I do one thing before I settle back down, every time, and I've never once told him why. I check which way he's facing. And then I lie down facing him, my back to the west window, and I hold my own arms the way I held that clipboard, and I go back to sleep standing guard in the only way I have left. The light off our left side flew like it had been to the same schools we had. Out of everything I saw that November, that's the sentence that still bothers me. So I'll lead with it. My name's Sam Ortega. I'm 38, and I was a helicopter crew chief for 12 years, most of them flying nights over the ranges of southern New Mexico. 2-ship training flights, doors closed against the cold, pilots up front under their night vision, and me at my window in the back over a gun mount that carries nothing on training runs, with the best seat for plain old eyes in the whole formation. Let me put you in the seat first, because night flying is a particular room to live in. The airframe hums like a tuning fork you're sitting inside, a note that comes up through your boots and stays in your back teeth for hours after you land. The window seal breathes cold on your cheek all flight. Up front, it's all green, the pilots under their goggles in that emerald aquarium light. But back at my window, I flew naked eye by choice, like a lot of crew chiefs, because goggles narrow the world to a soda straw, and a scanner wants the whole dark. Intercom has its own etiquette, who talks and when, and after enough years a crew develops a shared silence that's as much a language as the calls are. A one-beat pause on the intercom in the right spot says more than a paragraph. Keep that in mind for later. 12 years of nights gives you the ground the way a sailor gets the sea. The basin from 2,000 feet is mostly dark, with a bead chain of highway strung through it, and the few lights that lived down there I knew personally. 3 ranch yards sat under our usual rote, and I could name them for you and tell you which one had the dog that lost its mind at rotor noise and which porch light burned out for a month in the spring. That's not a boast. It's just what a window seat does to a brain over 12 years. Everything down there had a name, a place, and a reason, and anything new stood out like a match in a dark room. I should also establish my boredom credentials since this is that kind of story. I have logged birds, balloons, flares, and every trick a tired eye plays. I once spent a whole flight tracking a mystery light that turned out to be Venus behaving badly through haze, and I was aboard for a legitimate near miss with a drone once. A real, no-kidding metal object in our piece of sky, close enough that I saw its little green arm lights go past my window. And I can tell you that story in the world's most boring voice now, because it had a shape, a cause, and a paperwork trail. Some contractor's survey bird, off its approved corridor, flown by a man who filled out forms about it for a month. That's what a real intruder looks like in our world. It's rude, it's dangerous, and then it's paperwork, and everyone involved has a name and a phone number. Hold that next to what I'm about to tell you. Things in the sky, in my experience, are always one of about 9 things. That night made it 10. Our aircraft had a sensor ball with a thermal camera, a FLIR, and before every night flight there was a calibration ritual I was part of. On the apron sat a heat plate the sensor tech called the toaster, and we'd slew the ball onto it, check the picture, check the ranging, and the tech had a saying he'd deploy every single time the screen came up crisp. The eye never lies. Oldest joke on the crew said the way you'd say, "Amen," and I want you to have it in your ear the way we had it in ours, because the whole flight ran it through a shredder. The night was clear, cold, moonless, both ships out on a standard route, 40 minutes in and everything nominal. I was on my window doing my slow scan of ground I knew by heart, and there was a glow on the basin floor where no glow lives. Soft, round, steady. About the size a porch light would be from our altitude, which is exactly what my brain fielded as for about 4 seconds, until the geography caught up. There is no porch there. There's no ranch, no road, no tank, no pump, no anything. On a stretch of flat I'd crossed 1,000 times, and I said so on intercom, easy and professional, and called the bearing. The front seats found it. Trail ship found it. And for a minute it was almost fun, the way a new thing in a known sky is fun, everybody offering their 9 explanations. Then it started keeping station with us, and the fun went out of the airplane like cabin pressure. Keeping station. I want to be exact because this is the part that separates it from every light I ever logged. Ground lights slide behind you. Vehicles crawl and lag. Even another aircraft holds its own line and you converge or you don't. This thing sat low off our left, below us, and out maybe a mile, and it stayed there. We came through a heading change, a real one, 20 degrees or more, and it came through it too. Same arc, same rate, below and left the whole way. The way your wingman's lights sit in the same piece of your window through a turn because he's flying formation on you. Nothing about the picture changed except everything it implied. Then a second heading change, same result. It wasn't following us. Following is behind, it was flying with us. The pilot in command that night was a chief warrant officer named Marsh, a man with a voice like a dial tone, and I mean that as the highest compliment aviation gives. He keyed the sensor. Our tech slewed the ball onto the bearing, and I watched the screen at my station repeat down from the front, and the screen showed the basin floor, cold and empty. Flat scrub, gray on gray, ranging clean, focus clean. 4 sets of human eyes had the glow. The toaster certified never lies eye had nothing at all. He swept it. He went wide, came back through the bearing, reset the ball and did it again. Nothing, twice, on a sensor that had painted a rabbit's body heat for us once from altitude as a party trick. Eyes said light. Screen said empty. Both of those held steady for minute after minute, and there is no crew procedure, anywhere, for choosing between your windows and your instruments when they've stopped agreeing. You're just 5 guys in the dark holding 2 truths, going 4 miles a minute. Trail ship offered us the ranch yard theory, and for about a minute the whole formation wanted to marry it. A yard light, a trick of angle, our own motion painting it with false life. I ran my 3 ranches in my head and none of them sat right, but I wanted it like everybody wanted it, and someone up front actually exhaled a laugh, the sound of a crew agreeing to be reasonable. Then the next turn came, and the glow banked with us. I don't have a smaller way to say it. Through the turn, its aspect changed the way a formation mate's lights change, tilting with our tilt, holding its piece of my window like it was welded there, and the laugh was gone for good. And Marsh said the only thing anybody said for the next while, in the dial-tone voice, and it's the one piece of dialogue I'll quote you from 12 Years of Flying. Everybody just fly. So we flew. That's the strangest part to explain to ground people. There was no evading, no drama, no chasing it with the sensor anymore. 2 helicopters full of professionals flew a training route straight and level, while something that our best camera swore was not there, flew a perfect loose formation off our left side, and the discipline in those aircraft was total, and the discipline was the fear. You could hear it in what the intercom didn't carry. Nobody named it, nobody does, and after some stretch of time I genuinely cannot give you a number for, the glow left, and even its leaving was wrong. It didn't fall behind, didn't climb, didn't accelerate out into the dark. It got smaller into the ground. Down isn't right either. It reduced in place, like a thing withdrawing along a direction my window didn't have, and the basin floor was just the basin floor. 3 ranch yards and a bead chain highway. Everything named and placed and reasoned, the way I'd known it for 12 years, and would never quite know it again. The tape is the part I kept for last, the way everybody in this line of stories seems to keep one piece for last. Flights like ours record, video and intercom both. Maintenance pulled the mission tape as routine, and the tape had a gap. 19 seconds, all channels black. Not corrupted looking, not static. Black, clean, like a held breath. And here's the piece I'd hand back if I could. Under the black, the audio carries on. Our voices. 5 of us, calm as a checklist. Because it is a checklist, the standard calls in the standard order in our own unmistakable voices, and not one man aboard remembers saying those words. We watched it together in the debrief shack, listening to ourselves be fine for 19 seconds none of us owns, and the recorder went to the bench and benched serviceable. No fault found. The sensor tech ran his calibration 3 mornings straight after that. The toaster glowing on the apron at dawn, and it was perfect every time, and he stopped saying the eye never lies. Not solemnly, he just stopped, the way a family drops a joke that died at a funeral. Nobody wrote any of it up beyond the maintenance language. Gap, recorder, no fault found. There's no box on a form for it, flew formation politely, and even if there were, no aviator alive is putting his wings next to that sentence. The silence isn't a cover-up, or, if it is, it's the kind we run on ourselves. You love flying, you keep flying, and you learn which 19 seconds to leave in the black. The night it happened ended the way all flights end, which was somehow the strangest scene of all. We landed, shut down, and did the post-flight the way we always did, and nobody said one word beyond the work. But the wipe-down ran long. Every man on that crew found something extra to rag off. Some panel to check twice, the way you'll polish a car you can't afford to think about. And we stayed with that aircraft in the cold on the apron a good half hour past any reason. 5 guys not leaving. And then somebody's flashlight clicked off and we all walked in together. Closer bunched than men usually walk. Nobody planned any of that. I only saw the shape of it later. I'm on the maintenance side full-time now, and I still love night flights, and I'd go back to a window seat tomorrow. But 2 things came home with me for good. I don't listen to mission audio alone anymore. If a tape needs reviewing, I find company, daylight, coffee, another set of ears, and I couldn't fully tell you what I think the company is for. And at the hangar, when the young guys get going about lights over the basin, the way young guys always will, I give them the only debrief I've ever settled on. It flew well, I tell them, and they laugh, and I let them. Whatever it was, it flew well. It knew our turns before our own tape did, and somewhere under 19 seconds of black, in 5 calm voices, there's a version of that flight that got recorded over the top of us, and I have made a very comfortable life out of not asking whose. The dash cam swears the whole thing was 1 frame long. 1 frame. I've opened that file on 3 different computers and I'll get to it, but I want it sitting on the table from the start because everything I'm about to describe fit inside a single frozen picture of an empty road, according to the machine that was watching with me. My name's April Munoz. I'm 27, I was an airman stationed in southern New Mexico at the time, and this was a Tuesday night in March on US 54 northbound, coming back from my sister's place in Alamogordo at 2 in the morning. That drive was the most familiar 40 minutes of my life. Twice a month for 2 years, same road, same hour, because my sister worked evenings and I worked days. So our visits always ended past midnight with leftovers in a grocery bag on my passenger seat and her waving from the doorway in her pajamas. 50-some miles of dead straight 2-lane. 1 gas station that matters. 2 dead motels with their signs half gone. A blinking yellow light at a crossroads that I have never once seen another car actually use. And the reflector posts, hundreds of them, strobing by in the headlights with that soft tick-tick-tick rhythm that hypnotizes you if you're not careful. I knew that road the way you know a song. I even knew its radio geography, because out there stations fight over the dial, and there's an exact spot just past the second dead motel where the country station drowns out the gospel 1 mid-word, every single time. I used that spot as a landmark. That's how known this road was. Its static had a street address. I'm careful about that drive, and I want the specifics on record since the specifics are what got bent. My phone rides in a dash mount plugged into the charger, always. The dash cam is piggybacked into the same socket with a splitter. That setup is a rule I made after a water pump died on me outside Vaughan once at night. 60 miles from anything, phone at 9%. Never again. Power is the plan, that's the whole rule. Everything charged, everything running, everything recording. The camera was cheap, loop recording, chopping the drive into 3-minute files, and I never thought about it once. That was the point of it. It thought about the road, so I didn't have to. That night the phone was at 4% when I left, which broke my rule before the road ever did. My charger cable had been dying at the connector all week, working only at a certain angle, and I'd been meaning to replace it with the specific intensity of someone who means to do things. So the phone sat in its mount at 4%, charging when the cable felt like it, and my sister's porch light did its little sweep across the rear view as I pulled out, and the leftovers rode shotgun, and everything was as ordinary as bread. The radio handoff spot came up on schedule. Second dead motel, tick, 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 and I actually did the thing I always did, which was half listen for the country station to drown the gospel station, because rituals are rituals at 2 in the morning. Except the handoff went wrong. The gospel faded like always, and what came up underneath wasn't the country station. It was static, but I need a better word than static because static is random and this wasn't. It had a rhythm, a slow swell, and fade, swell and fade, maybe once every few seconds. Tidal, like listening to something breathe through a wall of cloth. I hit seek. The dial spun the whole band and came back and settled into the same breathing static like it had looked around the whole world and found only that. I turned it down, not off, down. I've thought about why not off, and the honest answer is that off would have meant admitting something, and I wasn't ready. Then the car ahead of me stopped. There'd been one set of taillights out front of me for miles, half a mile up, keeping pace, my only company. Brake lights bloomed, and it just stopped, dead, in the lane, on an open, empty highway. No hazards, no drift to the shoulder. I slowed and swung wide to pass, heart doing its first real work of the night, and I looked over the way you do, ready to see anything. A drunk? a dog in the road. What I saw was a man leaning forward over his steering wheel, both hands still on it, looking up. Not at me, not at the road. Up, through the top of his windshield, with his mouth a little open, at something my roofline was hiding from me. And in the 2 seconds I had him in my window, he never moved. And then he was behind me, a pair of headlights shrinking in my mirror. Still stopped, still looking at the sky. I'd love to tell you. I pulled over to check on him. I didn't. I watched my mirror instead, guilty about it for a quarter mile. And I did see his hazards come on back there eventually, small and human and blinking away in the dark. And I made a deal with myself that hazards meant he was okay, because I needed both hands and everything else right about then. Because right about then my own windshield found what he was looking at. 2 pale lights off the west shoulder, low. Not in the sky the way aircraft are in the sky. Low, maybe treetop height if that country had trees, out over the scrub, and they were keeping pace with me. I was at 68, cruise on, and they sat in the same piece of my windshield mile after mile, not gaining, not falling back, no strobe, no beacon, no color to them but a pale, nothing white. And the wrongest part, the part my eyes kept refusing, was the ground under them. Nothing. Light that bright should have thrown a glow on the scrub below it, and the scrub stayed black, invisible, like the light was arriving in my eyes without bothering to exist along the way. The reflector posts kept ticking by, lit by my ordinary headlights, ordinary physics on my side of the road, and across the center line, 30 feet up, physics had gone quiet as that radio. Inside the car, things started disagreeing. The dash clock and my phone have a known relationship. The dash runs 2 minutes fast, has forever. One of those car quirks you stop seeing. I looked down at some point and they matched to the minute, which was its own small wrongness. Looked again later, the dash was behind. Behind, then fast again by too much, and I know how this sounds. I was doing 70 on an empty highway, glancing at clocks like a crazy person. But you have to understand the instruments were all I had. The radio was breathing. The lights wouldn't leave my windshield. My phone sat at 4%, dying. Cable at its bad angle. And the little charging icon was flicking on and off, in time with nothing. And then the warmth. This is the part I tell the fewest people. My heater was off. March night, cold car, cold hands on the wheel at 10 and 2 like they teach you, and for one breath, one single in and out, the inside of that car went warm. Not heater warm, noon warm. Parked in July warm, sun on your shoulders warm, a whole summer folded into about 4 seconds, gone so completely afterward that the cold felt new. Nothing touched me. I want to be clear, because people hear this kind of story waiting for the touch, the missing time, the white room. Nothing touched me. It was the closeness of the nothing that I can't put down. Whatever that warmth was, it stood as near to me as weather stands for one breath. And then it was somewhere else. The crossroads came up somewhere in the middle of all that. The blinking yellow I told you about, the one no other car ever uses. It blinks on a timer, steady as a metronome, my whole 2 years of driving that road. That night it was dark as I came up on it, and then it blinked, once, exactly as I passed under. One amber pulse in my mirror like an eye deciding not to bother. And I am not going to sit here and tell you a traffic light was in on it. I'm telling you what the drive was like. Every familiar thing on that road had gone half a degree off true, and I was counting on all of them. And one by one they were letting me down gently. Between one glance at the mirror and the next, the lights weren't. I don't say they left because leaving is travel, and there wasn't any. There was lights, and then there was empty windshield, and within a minute the radio's breathing faded under a real station arriving mid-chorus, some song I knew, and I laughed. Once, Too loud in the little car, a bark of a laugh with nothing funny anywhere near it, and I gripped the wheel and drove like a student driver, both hands, eyes forward, all the way to the gate. The gate guard leaned down with his flashlight and gave my car the once-over and said, "Long night?" And I said, "Yeah, my sister's," and that was the first lie, not a big one. Just the first brick in the wall everybody in a story like this ends up building, because what was I going to say? At the gate at 3 a.m, to a kid with a clipboard, the lights kept pace but the scrub stayed dark? There's no line on the visitor log for that either. The accounting came the next day, and the accounting is why I'm here talking instead of letting it all soften into maybe I was tired. 3 things. My phone, which left Alamogordo at 4% with a dying cable, arrived at the gate at 9, charged up 5 points, on a cable that couldn't hold a connection over a pothole. Fine, cables are witches, I'd let that one go alone. But the gas station receipt in my cup holder, time-stamped, against the gate log's timestamp, leaves about 18 minutes of that drive that I cannot place. 18 minutes long, on a road I have done in the same 40-odd minutes twice a month for 2 years, with cruise control on. I've run it every way. There's no version where I dawdled that much, and I remember no stopping, no slowing, nothing but 70 miles an hour of wrongness. And then the dash cam, my cheap, loyal, 3-minute file dash cam. Every file from that night is normal, headlights and reflector posts, tick, 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 except one. One file, right where the handoff spot should be, and it isn't a video. It's a single frame. A still of the empty road ahead, posts lit, center line glowing, nothing else visible, and the file's own properties say its duration is 22 minutes. One frame, 22 minutes deep. I've opened it on 3 computers. I've let it sit on the screen like it might blink. It's the calmest picture of a road you've ever seen. I still make the drive. My sister still waves from the doorway, and the leftovers still ride shotgun, and most nights US 54 is just a song I know. But my rules got amendments. Full tank for 100 miles. Phone at 100% before I roll. New cable, no exceptions. Power is the plan. And I've stopped using the word corrupted about that file, even in my own head, because I looked it up once, and corrupted means damaged, means a mistake happened to it. Nothing looks damaged about that frame. It's clean, it's steady, it's perfectly exposed. One frame, 22 minutes. That's not a mistake, that's a summary. Somewhere in a folder on my laptop is 22 minutes of my life filed as a single picture of an empty road, and the empty road is the honest part. And I keep it, and I don't open it much anymore, and when people ask me why I gas up so religiously for such a short trip, I tell them my rule. Power is the plan. They think it's about breaking down. It's about being sure that if the night ever summarizes me again, something I own is awake enough to write down more than one frame of it. The summer I was 30, a light walked our section line 3 nights running, and it read every stake we'd set, and I have thought about it, quietly and without much fear, for 44 years. My name's Harold Nance. I'm 74 now. In 1978, I was a surveyor on contract to the range in southern New Mexico, and this is the last story I have and the gentlest. And I've saved my telling of it for a time in my life when I could do it justice, which mostly means slowly. Surveying then wasn't what it is now. No satellites doing your thinking. It was a transit on a tripod, brass and glass, and a 100-foot steel chain you dragged across the country 100 feet at a time, and arithmetic in a field book with a pencil you licked. 3 of us worked that job. Ed Whitlock was party chief, a man with wire glasses from his army days and a licked pencil, and a gruffness he wore over his kindness like a canvas coat. The 3rd was a young rodman whose name I'll keep, since I've lost track of him and can't ask. We had a truck with a choke, 2 canvas tents, a percolator with a schedule stricter than ours, and blue enamel cups I can still feel in my hand, that particular hot-thin handle that bit you through the glove. The work was north sections of the range. Empty, even by range standards, flat creosote country running up toward low hills. Our radio schedule was twice a day, morning and evening, weather and numbers, and between those calls the silence was the whole world, and none of us minded. Surveying is a trade for men who like standing still in big country writing small numbers. You drag the chain true, and there's a call and answer to it. Tension on the chain, and the man ahead sings out, "Chain," and the man behind answers, "Chain," and the pins go in and get counted, and the day goes by 100 feet at a time. I want you to have that rhythm, because it's the rhythm the whole story keeps. Tension, call, count. There are worse ways to spend a life. We flagged our stakes as we went, wooden stakes with cloth flags, a line of them running back toward the section corner, and the corner itself held the benchmark. A brass cap set in concrete, stamped with its numbers. The kind of little permanent thing my whole trade exists to plant and defend. Nobody visits a benchmark but us. That's worth saying. They sit out in the country for decades holding still, holding their numbers, and the only hands that ever touch them belong to men like me and Ed. The first night I was up late with coffee, and I saw a light out along the section line. Low, soft, small, like a lantern carried at about knee height, and my first thought was exactly that. A man with a lantern, which at 11 at night in that country would have been its own kind of event. But it didn't swing the way a carried light swings, and it made no sound, and no man showed above it. It moved at a walking pace along our line, and at each stake it paused. I stood by the tent and watched it work its way up our day's labor, stake to stake, patient, deliberate, pausing at each flag about as long as you'd pause to read a pin number and note it, and then it went along past the last stake and was gone. Not out, not up, just gradually less there. And I stood a while, and then I went to bed, and I did not wake Ed, and I've never fully explained that to myself except that the night had felt, somehow, like it was going about legitimate business. I told them in the morning. The rodman grinned, ready for it to be a joke. Ed didn't grin. He asked me 2 questions, which stakes and how long at each, and my answers took the grin off the young one's face too, though I couldn't tell you why they landed that way, except that pausing at stakes is not a lights business. It's a surveyor's. The second night it came back at the same hour, and all 3 of us were up for it. Coffee poured, chairs turned, an audience of tradesmen, and it ran the line the other way. Down the stakes, back toward the corner, same walking pace, same pauses, reading our line in reverse the way you'd check your own arithmetic, and I remember the percolator ticking as it cooled, and nobody saying much, and then Ed Whitlock did the thing I think about most nights I remember this at all. He got up, poured a 4th cup of coffee, walked out a little way, and set it on the crate we used for a table facing the line, and came back and sat down. Nobody laughed. The young one started to, and it died on him. The cup sat there steaming in the dark like an offering at the edge of the firelight, and the light finished our stakes and faded on, and the coffee was cold and untouched in the morning, and no one said one word about it, then or ever. That was Ed's whole comment on the matter, that cup, and I've come to believe it said everything the 3 of us had, which was, "We see you, and you're welcome to look, and we won't trouble you while you work." The 3rd night it went to the benchmark. Straight down the line, no pauses this time, as if the stakes were checked and done, and it stopped over the section corner and stayed. Longest it ever held anywhere. The 3 of us watched from our chairs, and I want to describe what that watching felt like, because it's the heart of this, and it's the part people never guess. It wasn't fear, it wasn't even wonder, quite. It was the feeling of watching a stranger be good at your own trade. The light sat over that brass cap the way Ed sat over a field book, and the night was easy around it. Crickets going, nothing hushed, nothing wrong. And in my head, uninvited, went the old antiphon. Tension, call, count, and after a long while the light grew less and less, and the corner was dark. And we went to bed like men at the end of a workday, because that's what it felt like, the end of somebody's workday. 3 mornings, one small thing. The benchmark cap was warm. I went out at dawn each of those 3 days, first light, ground cold enough to sting your knuckles, dew heavy on the chain where it lay coiled, and I put my bare hand on that brass, and it was warm, like a doorknob in a lived-in house. 3 mornings. I had the young one feel it once, and he pulled his hand back and looked at me, and I said, "Brass holds the day's heat sometimes," which was a lie of the mildest kind, because I'd been touching cold benchmarks at dawn my whole working life. I said it flat. He took it. That was the last we spoke of it. The job closed out clean. I want that on the record, because it matters to me professionally, even now, every number checked. The line was true, the arithmetic balance to the 100th of a foot. Whatever had read our work had found it good, or at least had left it alone. Ed wrote no unusual conditions in the daily log, in his small, correct hand, and the rodman initialed it, and I initialed it, and that, I suppose, is the true beginning of not talking about it. 3 sets of initials, under a sentence we all knew was a courtesy. Not a lie exactly. A courtesy. The kind you extend to something that extended one to you. Ed's gone now, years back. The young one went east, and I hope his life was good. And me, I'm an old man with a hallway full of framed quadrangle maps. And there's one particular map I stop at some evenings with my coffee, the one with those north sections on it, and my thumb knows right where the corner is. Some summers I drive out. You can't get near it anymore, the range is the range, but the public road passes as close as the public gets, and there's a wide spot where a man can pull off. I park there in the evening, with the engine ticking as it cools, and a meadowlark usually going somewhere on a fence wire, and the flats running off west the way they always have. The stakes are long gone, of course. Wood and cloth don't last a decade out there, but the benchmark is still in the ground. Brass in concrete, holding its numbers, the way we left it. The desert held still for me my whole working life. It let itself be measured, 100 feet at a time, and it never once complained. And 3 nights one summer, something came down our line and read the measurements back, and found them good and kept its own counsel, same as us. I don't wonder about it anymore. That surprises people. But wondering needs somewhere to go, and mine arrived a long time ago. Whatever walks that country knows where everything is, better than we did, better than anyone will. And the cap is still out there tonight, holding its numbers in the dark, and it is probably cold now, that brass on its cold ground, under all those stars. Probably.